It's nice to see their somebody was yeah.
We doing good? Good, thank you. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for coming. Those joining us in person, and we also have a Zoom link, so we have people joining us on Zoom. My name is Dipti Clark. I am the chair of Glencoe's Council for Inclusion and Community, formerly known as the Community Relations Forum, if you have heard that name. As a council, our mission is to promote and further the village's strong public policy against discrimination, bigotry, and bias in any form in support of diversity, equity, and inclusion, encouraging mutual respect, cooperation, and understanding amongst those who live, work, visit, and do business in the village. We started a series of town halls to encourage dialogue between various community members and organizations, focusing on seeing Glencoe through the lens of DE&I. Our first town hall was in the spring this year, and it was held on Zoom due to the pandemic. Our panelists were Dr. Catherine Wang from District 35, the Writers Theater team, Karen Edelson from the Historical Society, and Bill Hansen from Family Services of Glencoe. It was well attended, but again, it was in Zoom. So we're very excited for our second town hall today to be in person and at this fantastic Writers Theater. So on behalf of the council and the village, I do want to thank the team at Writers Theater who have been gracious to host us, as well as helped us set up this lovely view that you can see. So special kudos to Samantha and Adam. Samantha is here somewhere, a minute ago. So thank you very much. I also want to thank our village for their support of the council and the work that we are doing, including our village president, Howard Roy, and our board of trustees, our village manager, Bill Corrali, and his team, our director of public safety, Carrie Lewandowski, and our liaisons, Emily Springler, Richard, and Jordan Lester, who've been very, very helpful in getting all this together. So thank you. Our council members have worked hard on this event. We have wonderful panelists tonight that I would like to introduce briefly. We have Reverend Dr. Barbara Jamor, who's the minister in religious education and outreach at the North Shore United Methodist Church, and she is also the president of the Glencoe Clergy Association. We have Brooke Flower, who is a business owner of the flower shop in downtown. So if you do happen to see it, please visit Brooke. And we have, of course, Andy Kim, who is our director at the Glencoe Public Library. So I don't think any of them need any more introduction, but we will have our moderators this evening from our council Reverend Gary and Vivek Mali, who will moderate this discussion. And among all of our council members that have worked hard to put this together, I do want to say thank you. We are getting the dialogue started. We're very excited. So thank you. I'm doing my due diligence. Because I'll see.
Hello, everyone. My name is Vivek Mali. I am a new member of this council as of June. I want to first thank all the panelists for being here. I'm glad we're able to do this live. One bit of housekeeping first for Q&A, and there's the cloud word concept that we're collecting. There's QR codes here live in the register, and I think there's a link if you're on Facebook Live. If you want to submit a question, that's the way to do it. If you have a device, just scan the code here. It should pull you to the Slido site, and there are two tabs. It'll default to the poll, which is the cloud word, and then just to the left of that is the actual Q&A tab. So please participate that way. And at the end of each presentation, at the end of all three presentations, we'll, Reverend Gary and I will moderate the questions. Our first speaker, as Nipsey just introduced, is Dr. Barbara Dvorak. She holds a Master's of Divinity and a PhD in religious education from Garrett Evangelical Theological Seminary. In addition, she holds a Bachelor's and Master's degree in music education from the University of Illinois. Her PhD incorporated her interest in the arts, aesthetics, and creativity with its focus on incorporating creativity into the practice of religious education. Barbara has been a resident of Glencoe for 42 years. She's married to Scott Javor, a lifelong Glencoe resident with an architectural practice in the village. Barbara and Scott serve on the board of Pan-African Rural Health and Social Services. They are passionate about bringing transformative healthcare and sustainable quality of life to people residing in the Jong Chiefdom of rural Sierra Leone. So please welcome Dr. Ford.
Thank you. Tonight, I have the honor of representing the Glencoe Clergy Association and the North Shore United Methodist Church. And I will also share some of my personal experiences in relation to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I was taken aback when I walked in to see that marvelous statement that is presented for you to sign this evening. It's a wonderful, wonderful statement and very powerful. So I hope I can measure up to it. If you need any further inspiration, refer to that. I think it's a marvelous document. Martin Luther King said, "It is the love of God working in the lives of people. This is the love that may well be the salvation of our civilization. But the end is reconciliation. The end is redemption. The end is the creation of the beloved community. It is this type of spirit and this type of love that can transform opposers into friends." Transforming opposers into friends. A challenge in these divisive and difficult times that encourage us to find a way to authentically communicate. Empathy and compassion in personal relations between family, friends, and neighbors has the ability to form a foundation for strengthening bonds between people inside and beyond our immediate circle. It takes risk and courage to open ourselves to difficult conversations, but authentic dialogue allows for the possibility of reconciliation. As a Christian scholar, I have done extensive research into the origins of anti-Semitism. It is a story that has remained silent for too long, and telling it is extremely painful. But knowing the why is intrinsic to the how, the how to prevent anti-Semitism from gaining further momentum, and in this time it is. Stories invite us into another person's world, another person's experience. Empathy for another person's joys and sorrows helps us to become more inclusive, helps us to embrace diversity and to find common ground. It also helps us to become curious about another. I have been privileged to see the transformational love described by Dr. King in the quote, exemplified in our houses of worship. Our clergy and congregations have responded to the issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Each of our congregations have actively engaged them with integrity and hope. Our houses of worship have unique perspectives and traditions, but all endeavor to be welcoming, caring, and compassionate. At North Shore United Methodist Church, where I serve with Pastor Scott Himmel, our congregation has initiated a racial justice committee to study and engage with issues dealing with systemic racism. We are a reconciling congregation welcoming the LGBTQIA community. And we are deeply troubled about the continued rise of anti-Semitism and have explored its implications in our adult forums. These areas of concern demand that we continually explore new ways to support sustainable change. But North Shore UMC is not unique. All of our congregations engage these issues and continually endeavor to help our members to work to bring about a better community and world. This work is a never one and done situation. It requires us to constantly move toward transformation. Our houses of worship continue to build relationships that help expand our perspectives and strengthen our efforts to bring about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And those can be as simple as sharing in a barbecue, offering a concert for the community, or the rally for racial justice that was held in the wake of the George Floyd killing. At our church, we partnered with Glencoe Youth Services in their outreach efforts, and most recently, we had a backpack initiative for underserved students living in Chicago's West Side. Will Barnard, who's here joining us this evening, their executive director, spoke at this worship service, and he's given me permission to share his beautiful comments. When I took over this position in August of 2019, I had my own fears I had to overcome working in a community like Glencoe. As a Black man, my sole purpose as executive director is to create meaningful and beneficial experiences for the youth in the community. But is that enough? Not at all. We have to build bridges into communities that need our support and help. It's less about skin color and more about integrity. Simply, are you a good person? And do you want to see others do well? We're all human beings at the end of the day. Yes, unique cultural experiences make us different on the outside, but what about that pink thing in our chest? Does that count for anything anymore? I believe it does. I believe community equals family. We listen to each other, we respect each other, and we care to help communities who need it. This is what my ancestors fought for, to work together as equals, building a bridge into our communities. There will always be detractors, and with the goal to cause chaos. But the more we work together, the more we set the example of what serving really looks like, with one purpose, and that is simply to help people. Will's words are an affirmation to Glencoe and a challenge, because everyone who lives, works, teaches, or performs in Glencoe should have the ability to share a similar experience. Glencoe was founded as a utopian community. Its vision was one of an idyllic village meeting the needs of its inhabitants and providing an environment of stability and peace. Our community has had its share of failures and missed opportunities throughout its history. But the vision exists, and it calls us to continue to live into its promise. Our village government, schools, Businesses, civic organizations, and houses of worship are charged with bringing about a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive environment, forming a framework for living in Glencoe. But these goals should be carried beyond our village and into the broader community and into the wider world. We should serve as a beacon of light, not in just our own little sphere, but far beyond our resources, expanding ourselves as far as we can. And so many people, so many generous and big-hearted people in Glencoe are doing just that. My husband and I are blessed to have a deep and abiding friendship with Dr. Sam and Mary Cornoy. They left Sierra Leone when they were young to pursue medical careers in the United States, and then the tragic war decimated their country and took the lives of many of their closest relatives. They returned to their village over a decade ago and found hope, a distant memory. They began the work of transformation, providing healthcare, planting crops, supporting education. The obstacles have been many and the challenges continue, but the resilience factor for the people in Sierra Leone is being restored. Dr. Sam and Mary have hope and resilience in abundance, even after they lost one of their sons to a drive-by shooting on the lawn of a friend's home. Our work with their board has been transformative for my husband and I. Our board is African American, African, and Anglo. And all of us have learned through common purpose to engage with one another in such a positive way. It has transformed our lives. And that is why I just cannot say enough about embracing the chance to expose yourself to diversity, to reach out and feel what it's like to be inclusive and to search for equity. They are sacred gifts. They are not without their challenges, but promise a richer, fuller personal life and quality of community. Our lives have been deeply blessed. They provide a wellspring of hope for a better tomorrow. I close with these words of Barack Obama. Hope is not blind optimism. It's not ignoring the enormity of the task ahead or the roadblocks that stand in our path. It's not sitting on the sidelines or shirking from a fight. Hope is that thing inside us that insists, despite all evidence to the contrary, that something better awaits us if we have the courage to reach for it and to work for it and to fight for it. Hope is the belief that destiny will not be written for us, but by us, by the men and women who are not content to settle for the world as it is, who have the courage to remake the world as it should be. Ultimate test.
We'd like to thank Dr. Jabbar for her presentation on this evening. Once again, we want to remind you, if you have questions, those who are virtual, to click the link. It will take you to the link that will allow you the opportunity to put your questions in. Those who are here in person, we ask you to scan the QR code, put in the code of 7733338, and type in your questions. It is my honor and privilege to introduce our next panelist. He is the Executive Director of the Glencoe Public Library. His name is Andrew Kim, but he told us to call him Andy. Andy joined the Glencoe Library in March 2016 and becoming the 10th director. Andrew's career began at the Glenview Public Library in 2007. He served as a circulation clerk. He then joined the Northbrook Public Library in 2009 as a librarian and had the pleasure of serving as the assistant director from 2014 to 2016. Andrew served as a treasurer for the Cooperative Computer Service Consortium, a network of 28 area libraries that share resources and data. And Glencoe is a proud chapter of this consortium. He also is an alumnus of the Illinois State Library, the Elevated Program of Future Library Readers, and a member of the American Library, Public Library, and Illinois Library Association. He is happily married to Michelle for 14 years, and they have 3 children, Isabel, Jade, and Jonah. Please help welcome our next panelist, Mr. Andrew Kemp.
How's everyone tonight? Yeah, it's great to see everyone. My name is Andy. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I'm Asian. My family comes from Korea. I was born here in Chicago. I've been a library professional for 15 years with the honor of serving as director of the Glencoe Public Library for the last 5. I want to thank the council chair, Dipti Clark, and the council members for inviting me to participate in tonight's event. I've had the pleasure of meeting and getting to know most of the council members as library director. I applaud your involvement, your advocacy, and your passion for our community. Thank you very much. When Ms. Mizell contacted me, inviting me to participate tonight, I was very grateful to be included in a panel with 2 stalwart community figures, in Barbara Jabor and Brooke Waller. I've had the privilege of getting to know Barbara through her leadership roles at North Shore United Methodist, as well as the GCA. And I've been a longtime fan of working with her flower shop ever since I got into town. So a lot of applause going over here. So here's what I'd like to do tonight. Most people that know me, I'm pretty formal and upright, and my shoulders are back and stuff. I see a lot of familiar faces. I see a lot of friends. So I'm gonna speak candidly and openly tonight. I'm gonna try to be as transparent as I can, answer as many questions as I can honestly tonight, because I think that's important. And it's our library that we're discussing too, right? So I hope you all will like me tonight. Everyone, I don't know if everyone got the handout, but there was a handout for my talk tonight. If you didn't get it, I will try and navigate it so as make it feel like you do have it. The library and the community of Glencoe through a DEI lens. For many in this community, the library is a go-to destination. It has been long known for its friendly and inviting staff, its balanced collection and materials, and engaging programs. Shortly after I began here in 2016, then President Lawrence Levin led a village-wide effort to make a formal statement that Glencoe stands unified and against any and all discrimination. As Barbara mentioned when she spoke, it is a very powerful statement. It remains so. So when the library board and I began discussing the library's adoption of this pledge, I requested one thing, just one thing, that we do not endorse the pledge without action, that our commitment does not ring hollow. So since then, the library trustees, the staff and I, with the support of the friends of the library as well, have tried to take as much action as we can. So in the handout that I have prepared tonight, page 1 is just trying to define what diversity, equity, and inclusivity is. Using President Biden's first executive order to advance racial equity and support for underserved communities through the federal government. The type in red, the bottom there, is from the American Library Association's DEI policy. I'm going to use my time more wisely and not read it all for you. But I ask you to take note of one common thread in both statements: creating and sustaining a fair system for everyone. That is a lot of work, a lot of difficult discussions, uncomfortable analysis, even for just one person, let alone a community of 9,000 people. But the end goal is so worthy of those things, aren't they? So earlier I said I didn't want the library's commitment to the pledge to be hollow. So let's talk about some of the things that we did. And by we, I mean my staff. I have a very strong, powerful, engaging staff of 33 people. And they are dedicated to this community, and I'm very proud of them and all their efforts. First, let's talk about the LGBTQ collection. Again, to be completely honest, I had nothing to do with initiating that. But this was the first action in support of the pledge. The collection is an interdisciplinary one with a focus on experiences, stories, and figures representing the LGBTQ community. So let me just kind of tell you how it started. We had a staff member named Rob Honorado. He had joined our staff, and well, actually, let me back. She had joined our staff. She had worked here at the Writers Theater. She had accepted a position with us as a circulation clerk. At her very first staff development day, which is a day-long training session for my staff, she challenged us. She challenged us and asked, what are we doing to be more inclusive? That one challenge in the middle of the day led to a one-on-one discussion between her and I. And we conjured up the idea of a collection. And Rob was very enthusiastic about it, to the point where I think about 2 days later, he came to me and our collections manager, services manager, Becky Halsey, with about 500 titles that we didn't have in the collection, and had requested that we buy all of them. That sort of enthusiasm we didn't want to quell. So we started working together on that. And then we went to the Friends and asked them to support us by funding this collection. And they generously donated about $1,500 to the cause. Today, it's a vibrant collection. It's about 931 items of materials in the collection, ranging from fiction, nonfiction, YA, and baby. Unfortunately, Rob left the staff, took a full-time position in the city. But we are forever thankful for her initiative and drive on our behalf. Some services that we have done in effort to be more inclusive. Again, to be completely candid, I almost omitted this information because it seems kind of standard and pro forma for public libraries to offer a homebound service and have a low vision magnifier on hand. But when I was thinking about it, I thought about one specific patron. Her name is Miss Coleman. She relied on homebound service on 2 separate occasions. One during the pandemic lockdown in early 2020, and then a second time when she fell ill and was permanently unable to visit the library. Now, Mrs. Ullman was not interested in ebooks or streaming offerings. She didn't want to lose the comfort from the weight of having a good book in her hands. My staff made sure that despite her life's challenges, she still felt that she was a member of our community. In regards to programs, whether the more in the forefront facets for the library. So for about a year and a half stretch there between summer of 2018 through the end of 2019, we ramped up our programming to showcase diversity that exists right here in Glencoe. We invited Tracy Bain for a speaking engagement in May 2018. Tracy is one of the most important figures in the Chicago LGBT community. Tracy is the publisher and editor of the Lindsay City Times. Soon after, we asked Rabbi Evan Maffick of Congregation Solel in Highland Park to join us. Rabbi Maffick presented an in-depth look at the contributions of the Jewish American community, the contributions that the Jewish American community had made within American culture. In June 2019, we celebrated Pride Month with our very first Drag Queen Story Hour and a fantastic panel discussion with members of the Glencoe Clergy Association, which is actually moderated by Ms. Kelly Anderson, who's in attendance today. Kelly, thank you so much. Not to embarrass Kelly, but she is a true advocate for the LGBT community, and we applaud all of her efforts. And as everyone probably knows, every single librarian, including myself, loves Frozen. And so we held our second Drag Queen Story Hour during the holidays of 2019 with the Frozen theme. Now, typically, I don't like citing attendance numbers, especially to equate as a successful program. But at that Drag Queen Story Hour, we fit 125 kids, parents, and grandparents in one room that day for a 45-minute program, singing and reading stories. And I was there with my youngest, Jonah, and it was just a sight to behold. It really was. It leaves me without words, but I was very proud of that, my staff that day. Moving on, partnerships. I'm highlighting some of the great partnerships and collaborations that the library has. If anything, and for better or for worse, to be honest, the library has always acted as like a support organization, right? The secondary, kind of, not the primary, but there if you need to go to. We thrive when another group or community collective comes to us for that support. And we rarely hesitate to work with wonderful organizations like Our Place and WOMAT and FSG. So with all that success, what challenges does the library face? Quite a lot. And I think it's probably the same as other organizations are experiencing today as well. The library right now has yet to execute an organized and deliberate assessment of who we are. We haven't really peeled back many of the layers yet. So, what I just shared with you, both the good and not so good. Good because they're examples of our library staff's efforts and a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusivity. Not so good because it's not quite creating and sustaining a system of fairness and equity, but we'll get there. So for tonight, in preparation for what I was going to share with everyone, I tried to analyze one facet of the library to share with you. And again, just to be completely honest, it didn't start out as something that I would put in a petri dish for us to analyze. It was more of a kind of a part of my introduction, get to know the library, here's the staff kind of thing. So on the second to last page of the handout is a breakdown of the library staff, your library staff. And there's a lot to look at in there, a lot to consider, right? There's a lot that we have to ask ourselves. First and foremost, is the library truly a diverse and equitable place to work? The library staff, women outnumber men on staff almost 3 to 1. Whites outnumber minorities almost 9 to 1. On average, men get paid $3.68 more than women. But women in management positions outnumber men 2 to 1. I'm sure there are logical explanations, right? But I wouldn't commit to the logic here if it were systematically unfair. This is just one example of what the library can do to improve itself. Assess to establish a consistency and fairness. When I was meeting with the Vivek last week, they asked me if I would consider bringing up an incident that happened at the library 3 years ago. And I'll end with this, and again, thank you for your time tonight. Now, when they asked, I didn't shy away from it, but I wasn't exactly jumping up and down at the opportunity to talk about it. So in April of 2018, as we were closing the library, one of my staff members, one of my children's librarians, discovered graffiti. Someone had drawn a swastika and the word Heil on one of our columns. What my librarian decided to do was try to wash it off. Unable to do so, my librarian thought the next best thing would be to cover it up. The librarian filled out an incident report, which is proper procedure for us. And in the morning, I contacted public safety. We put in a report, had a case claim number, etc. And then we proceeded to do what we were supposed to do. The right thing was to let the community know. It wasn't easy, because what we learned in looking back in hindsight and in retrospect, it was we had made many mistakes, right? How did I feel as a library director when that happened and the aftermath of it all? It was difficult to have experienced that in our community. I really, something of that nature, I didn't think could happen, especially when it occurred in the children's department. How did I feel personally about it? Pretty angry. I come from a pretty diverse background. I grew up in Morton Road. It's a blue-collar town. As I said, a lot of ethnicities there and such. So that sort of thing, although it was there, it wasn't like that. So what we learned from it was that we shouldn't hide it, that we shouldn't pretend that it was a one-off. And actually, it was Bob Young that came to me and to then library board president Louis Goldman, and challenged us. What can we do? What will the library do? How will we step up? I think we have more to do. I think we all do. But looking at the library and that incident 3 years ago, how much have we grown in those 3 years? I think we still have more to accomplish. I think collectively we can accomplish a lot together. So with that, I want to thank everyone for their understanding. I want to thank everyone for their patience and their support of the library and my staff and my board. Thanks again.
Our last panelist, Brooke Waller, she is the owner of the flower shop in town. She's been the owner of the flower shop the last 4 years, which she managed for about 10 years prior. She's a member of the LGBTQ plus community and feels that her business has really allowed her the opportunity to start and be the change she wants to see in the world. She has a major passion for flowers and life and visibility and inclusion for all. Please welcome Brooke.
I'm going to be way more disappointing than these guys because I don't have like a whole presentation for you. I'm coming at you from a little bit more real of a perspective because I don't have a business or a library or a church behind me. I do have a business. It's just a little business though. So I worked for the previous owner of the flower shop for about 10 years. If any of you frequented the shop, you know that it was a little bit different then. Great guy, just not very loud. We had taken a much different stance. I took over the shop 4 years ago, and being a member of the LGBTQ plus community, it was super important to me to make sure that if there were people in town that needed it, they knew that we were here. So we put up our giant balloon display. And it wasn't, I didn't even give it a second thought. It was just something that I felt like we needed to do. I hadn't really gotten super involved in putting myself out there like that prior to that. I wasn't loud about being gay or being married to a woman. I never had really come out to a lot of my clients prior to buying the business. They did a little article on me in the paper and it came out in that. I was like, okay, we'll tell everybody now. But that aside, fast forward a little bit to George Floyd last year, and we decided we were going to get a little bit louder this time. We decided we needed to make a little bit more noise because we decided too many people were being too quiet, and it's a really hard decision to put your whole passion and your whole business behind something that, sorry, everybody might not agree with. It's a hard position to take, and you'll hear why in a minute. When we decided that it was important for us to back that, we had done many things to try and support other communities. The first Halloween we were open, we did a huge drive. We had gotten involved with the Wood Family Foundation and done a huge drive for one of the schools. We replanted the courtyard for them. It was basically anything I could do to give back to the communities that maybe weren't getting as much as they needed back. So we helped some schools in Humboldt Park. We refurbished a kitchen for them so they could start a new kitchen program in their classes. Last year alone, we donated $20,000 to different charities in Glencoe. And around. We like to try and spread it here too as much as we can, but it's been a super big deal to me to make sure that we give back to other places too. Not everybody is as fortunate as we are to be here, so that's been a super important thing to me too. As far as some of the repercussions of all of this, we've had food thrown on our windows. We've had people rip signs down when we had them on the outside. We've had people tape things to our windows to let us know how they felt about stuff. I've gotten voicemails, emails, letters. I say this because I've had clients tell me that this doesn't happen here. And I want to be very candid and tell you that it does. It very much does. And there are people here that have felt it. Somebody that I'm close to at the post office has had a couple run-ins with just not some interesting, colorful conversation about why Black lives might matter and things like that. We've gotten a lot of pushback from that. It wasn't even so much the gay thing as it was the Black Lives Matter thing. And we were one of the few businesses in town that really took a stance with it. And it's been hard. My general experience in Glencoe, and I know all of you are here for a reason, and again, thank you all for having me. It's like you want me, I'm sure. But my general experiences in Glencoe have been unbelievably amazing. You guys have been the most welcoming group of people I have ever come across. And 98% of everything that's happened in Glencoe since I've owned the business has been wonderful, but there are those instances that are happening. And like I mentioned to both of you guys, the shop is here for whatever we can do to help propel it forward, not just in an LGBTQ stance, but for all, for inclusion, for equity, for hope, you know, for people to have some visibility. That's pretty much what I have thrown my entire shop into and what we're here for. And if anyone ever needs anybody, we're here for you. Like, that really is kind of where I'm coming from with it. So I know I don't have as much to say as they do. I just wanted to bring some experience for you guys. So, but thank you all for being here, and thank you for listening to what I have to say.
Help me thank our panelists once again. Being vulnerable and transparent. Once again, if you have questions, if you hear in person, make sure you scan that QR code, put in the code number for your questions. Those who are virtual, please click the link and it'll direct you right into the platform in which you can ask questions. I have a couple of hard ones. Yeah. All right. So those who are here who would like to raise a question, as present, just raise your hand. We'll just ask you to stand and speak loudly. All right. Anybody have a question before I go to? For our panelists, we're going to ask whoever feel led to answer this question to just come to the mic. First question comes from Amy, who asked, what is the single most impactful thing a person or an organization can do to ensure the value of diversity, equality, and inclusion and are reinforced to others? What is the single most impactful thing a person or an organization can do to ensure the value and diversity, quality, and inclusion and are reinforced to others?
What comes to mind in that, I think about the golden rule. And I think about that being translated into so many cultures, so many religions. And I think it's that sense of treating someone as you would like to be treated. It's as simple as that. When we know the stories of people, we become engaged with their lives. If you don't know, they become an other. Jacques Derrida had a lot to say about the other after World War II. And I think that that changes and shifts the dynamic. So when you allow yourself to be vulnerable, open, and authentic with another person, you've created an atmosphere that is radically changed from one where you have put a person into a category or a box or an assumption. And when you move beyond that, that offers that moment that I think you have those aha moments where you've discovered someone else. And I know that you've all had that because you feel almost elated when you do that. It's a wonderful experience. Sometimes painful, sometimes joyous, but you've allowed yourself to be authentic. And that's something we don't see much. We have a wall against that. And we have a lot of self-protection involved. And Brooke, thank you for your courageous statement, because that takes a lot to do that. And it's not easy to do that, to stand up for your principles and say, this is what I stand for, and I will move not farther from that line. That's, I think, what makes the difference between something that's acquiescent and something that really changes.
This question is also from Amy. Is there one critical derail factor that can undo a culture of inclusion?
Amy, we're arguing. Can you repeat that?
Is there one critical derail factor that can undo a culture of inclusion?
I would say that, minimizing experience is one way of derailing any sort of progress towards inclusion. Along the lines of only parallel to what Barbara was sharing with us, there is a requisite to be vulnerable when you want to connect with a person, be it someone that's completely unlike you or from a different background or even for exactly like you in terms of that sort of thing. I think it's vital that you do not minimize the experience, that person's experience or that person's life to that point. I think it's extremely vital to make sure that they feel heard and that they are heard.
Could I ask a follow-up question for Mr. Camp?
Yes, Andy, please, yeah.
Andy, I'm wondering, there's something called the Human Library that started in Denmark. Is there any way talking about how to help those encounters happen? It's very difficult to have an encounter in a diverse way, perhaps in Glencoe, because we're not particularly diverse due to housing and other issues. But I know the organization that was begun in Denmark is online, where people volunteer to talk to anybody who wants to talk to them. They represent maybe their gender, maybe their race, maybe their disability, maybe their anything, they're being a mom, a single mom, and people can then meet and talk. And I don't know if there's a way to make that happen, or there's, just new ideas to encourage those encounters, to help. We can go into the city, we can join organizations, but to really open that up so that people really can meet and talk with each other in a safe way. A new creative idea to promote inclusivity that maybe could be Glencoe leading the way. And the reason I'm asking you is sometimes libraries are a good forum for that. They have personal encounters, or they have some kind of opening up.
Thank you so much for that suggestion. I'm actually really glad I brought my notepad because I'm going to write that down. I'm not entirely familiar with the Human Library, but it sounds very familiar to. It's similar to something that I heard about. I can't remember if it's the library in this state or just somewhere in the United States that they would have these pockets of 15-minute windows with members of community members that had a story to tell. And you would literally check out those 15 minutes to engage with that person, to hear that person's story. And then 15 minutes are up, you would go on and you will travel and check out some other experience. But I think that's a fascinating idea. I certainly will look into that and see if that's something that would have some legs here in London. Thank you.
Next question. Please share your experience in the pros and cons of displaying inclusive symbols at community centers and or businesses. Please share your experience in the pros and cons of displaying inclusive symbols at community centers and businesses. This came from Anonymous.
Oh, I got this. I don't know a lot, but I got this one. So pros. Cannot tell you how many people have come up to me and said thank you. Even here, like the coolest thing on the planet is for somebody to feel seen. I grew up in Geneva. I didn't even realize I was gay until I was at 27. Like, it didn't seem like an option because I grew up in this perfect little town where things like that didn't happen. There was one Jewish girl, there was one Black family. So for people, and for anything, not just gay or Black or brown or disabled, there's so many things, like for people to just feel seen and feel heard is so important. Obviously, the cons of this are either, losing business is not a con. When you're losing the business you don't want anyway. So not a major big deal. The cons of it obviously though are the backlash that we've had, the letters, the emails, the people throwing crap on my windows, things like that, getting calls. I recently just got a letter from somebody in the mail. Like, it's still happening. Like, these are, like, don't get out much. Like, it's been up for like over a year. So, and we're still getting the Black Lives Matter. We feel like all lives matter. Well, we still can't understand this, that it's still not pie, and that just because somebody gets other, like, justifiable human rights, that you don't get less. It's just not how it works. So obviously the cons have been not, the pros have far outweighed the cons too. I don't want to make that sound like that's not true. The amount of people, Instagram, I get messages constantly, people that don't even live here that are like, thank you, my son is trans and you have no idea how much this means for them to see this. So we're going to keep doing it because the pros will always outweigh the cons, I promise you. So.
I have a follow-up question.
Yeah.
So what consequences did you, like, was there a support with them? Were you able to find out who it was?
So the first couple times it happened, we just kind of washed it off. We had, I'm sure you all remember the great shock out of last year. They're shaking their head. So we had like the pride balloons up and people wrote like Jesus saves and stuff. Like, I'm sorry, I just totally lost my train of thought. Can you say that one more time? I just completely lost it.
I was asking you if there was any consequences.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, so the first couple of times we just washed it off. We left the Jesus saves on the sidewalk, washed off the windows. Obviously, the taping it too, I didn't really think much of that one at the time. And I had asked a couple people, and they were like, I don't really think that's a bad thing. And like, the more I looked into it, was more some like weird propaganda stuff. So but again, just took that off. We had like maybe 3 or 4 instances before I finally just recently had public safety come out, after the last time where the food was legitimately thrown over the Black Lives Matter signs on the windows. That was really kind of when I finally was like, all right, this is maybe gone far enough. I was getting harassed by some woman on Yelp that quote unquote was from Glencoe, and like it was kind of outrageous, the stuff that was happening with it. So that coincided with the window throwing, so that was really why I called it. But I mean, there was really no way to find how anything happened. I do have cameras inside the shop, but not on the outside of the front of the shop. So if somebody does something inside or out in the back, I can see it, but I don't have actual cameras at the front. So it's not really. We did get a quote though and put them in because the next time it happens, it's going to blow up their face and put it on my window. So.
This next question is also from anonymous. What do you think is the most common mistake in an organization's thinking about diversity? And what steps should we consider to bring awareness? Again, what do you think is the most common mistake in an organization's thinking about diversity? And what step should be considered to bring awareness?
I think, I think that one of the things that can be a mistake is taking rash action without deliberation and thought, and really thinking about what you're going to say and why you're going to say it. Because if you can't stand up for what you're going to project, it's all empty. And I think you have to have, when we did our reconciling congregation work and inclusivity work, we did a lot of prior work before that, so that our congregation understood exactly where we were going and why we did it. And I think that's hugely important. Just saying something for the sake of saying something is not going to work. You have to be able to build in the why. If you do, then you'll have a stronger framework, a stronger foundation with which to build. And ultimately, you'll have more people buy in. And so I think that's my perspective then. That's what I said.
Questions here? If not, what can the town, leadership, and members do to provide visibility to the misconception that there is no bigotry in our community? Coming from anonymous. What can the town, leadership, and members do to provide visibility to the misconception that there is no bigotry in our community?
Well, I think the efforts of the village especially, I don't think it should be dismissed. Again, I think there's a lot of work ahead for all of us, but at the same time, I don't think we should dismiss the efforts that have already happened and continue to happen here. But I think one of the most important things that we can do collectively is to raise one voice, consolidated voice of all the organizations together, leadership, the entirety of leadership together. This community has a very strong effort. I mean, I think that's very clear to all of us. I for one, I'm very lucky, very fortunate to have the opportunity to speak to Dr. Wang and Lisa Shepard or Bill Hanks overall. I'm very fortunate to be able to have them as not only people that are peers, but as mentors in a lot of it as well. But then I think of just others. If they are at the library or come by the library, I see them out on the street just passing by. I would love to see us take greater advantage of the established network that we have in the town.
Yeah, one of the things that the council has, they're trying to find ideas on how to reach our community, so we have a dialogue and understand more perspectives, especially such perspectives as this doesn't exist in Glencoe, for example, right? So that partnering with someone, like larger audiences and networks, and so that's why we are trying. Because the goal is the more people we can reach out to, the more people we can talk to, and have dialogue amongst each other, the more we understand perspectives, why people think the way they do, and it's events like these that we hope to enlighten maybe when they go, aha, I never knew about that. Yeah, I see that being a problem. I thought it's a perfect world, an example. So that is our goal to try to reach out to it's a little bit of a challenge thing. Yeah, do it, but we're always looking for volunteers and ideas that we can pass in order. The village website has the email address and hear from.
This one's for anonymous as well. So I'm going to try to correct it. There's a typo, so hoping it's right. Is it possible for someone to disagree with BLM and not be racist? I think that's what they meant to say. And the second question, the second part is it possible for someone to disagree with the transgender agenda and not be homophobic? So say it another way. Is it possible for someone to disagree with BLM and be a racist? I'm sorry, question just the way they typed it is kind of confusing. And then, is it possible for someone to disagree with the transgender agenda and not be homophobic?
I don't think not agreeing with Black Lives Matter makes you a racist. I think your actions make you a racist. I think there's a maybe kind of a fine line there. I also kind of agree with the same with the trans. Like this is why conversations are so important and why they're so freaking hard to have. Like, these are hard things to talk about. It's really hard things to talk about. And especially if you're older, a lot of our pushback from people that I know were older clients that didn't grow up with a lot of this stuff. And it's completely understandable to me that like transgender is completely foreign. My mom is 75 years old and does not get it. Like, her daughter's gay and she can't wrap her head around it. Not that she doesn't try, but it's not, this is why it's so important to have conversations though, because I don't think anybody should be thinking that Black lives don't matter. And we shouldn't be saying that all lives matter, because all lives can't matter until Black lives matter. I mean, these are marginalized groups of people. It's same with transgender, like trans rights are real. People deserve to live their lives the way they should, and they shouldn't have to feel judged by people that don't understand it, which is exactly why I think people need to have these conversations more often and be uncomfortable and get into a place and get down and dirty with it, because until we start making this more okay to talk about, nothing's going to change. So.
Counties are doing well. We only have 2 more questions, then we're gonna get you off the hot seat. This question is directed to Andy, but we'll open it up for Lady Brooke and Dr. Barber as well. Question comes anonymous. To Andy, you indicated there is more work to do to reinforce DEI at the library. What things are underway or planned?
Literally no softball questions tonight. So, when we finished 2019, we thought we had a lot of momentum going into 20, and we all know what happened in 20, and we're still reeling from that. So, to be completely honest, we don't have anything planned for the end of 21 and 22. But I will say that we had a very thorough conversation about conducting a DEI audit of the library, soup to nuts. And a lot of it, you know, I thought it was kind of a no-brainer. Like, you know, I brought it up to the management team and I said, well, we should do this. The environment is right for this right now, and there are many outside, you know, there's support from the outside for this sort of thing. And actually, I was met with a lot more questions and challenges that I was not prepared to answer at that time. So, as I often do, and my team will tell you, I tend to go headfirst into a concrete pool a lot. And sometimes it's just their way of saying, you don't think it through a lot. So we thought about, okay, what does that mean? What does a DEI audit mean? And if Andy's saying that there's people outside, other organizations that can help us, ALA or consultants of that kind, well, how do we vet them? So there's a lot of questions I often ask and I don't have the answer to. So we don't have anything planned. But I do hope that changes. And we get something concrete in the works before 2022 starts.
That's a question. Yeah. So, you know, I'm probably a lone conservative in the group. A lone conservative. I've spent my life working to improve the lives of low-income people, many of whom happen to be people of color and in the gay lesbian community. But, you know, I'm of the position that a DEI audit scares the hell out of me. It sounds like a scrubbing of language and perhaps making sure certain books don't appear in the library. I don't like it. And there are other opinions I think that need to be voiced here as well. My wife is an emergency room physician. She works in an affirmation culture as it relates to issues like transgender. There was recently a patient that came through and, was appearing as a man, and they affirmed that gender. And, within that culture, it was not okay to say anything, to speak out against that. A person came in with abdominal pain, was discharged with the medicine that a man would get for abdominal pain and the symptoms they were presenting. Later left and had a miscarriage. He was a she, and that affirmation culture was deadly. And there's as much as there has been change that allows more support for disenfranchised communities, there's another side to the coin where there needs to be room to have that discussion. Black Lives Matter as an organization has some anti-Semitist roots. There absolutely is anti-Zionist information that has been on their website, on the leaders, it comes from the leaders' mouths. And being against Black Lives Matter, it could very well be about being against anti-Semitism. And the nuance doesn't happen in a chalk argument. It doesn't happen in a sign in the window. And I don't think it happens here. So I guess I'm probably maybe one of the only conservatives in the group. Real dialogue is not being fostered. It doesn't get fostered when, big inclusive and diversity, those are big D and big I. And that means like a wider stretch of people being included in the conversations. And so it's easy to talk to yourselves. It's harder to talk to others. And that means also, it's not all hearts and flowers. That's not what life is. Feelings get hurt. That's how good discussions happen. That's how growth happens. So I think it's important to kind of say the other side of things. That there are conservatives out there that are against a lot of different things. Doesn't make them homophobic. Doesn't make them against transgender people. Doesn't make them racist. It makes them conservative. And there's plenty of those people in this town who I think are being mischaracterized as something ist, and they're not.
I don't feel like I was trying to lump anybody into that. So if I made that seem that way too, I want to apologize, because I didn't mean that at all. So.
When did you walk in late?
I did walk in late. I wanted to be here early. I was at another event working to make sure that there was funding for low-income kids to get scholarships to go to private schools, because public schools aren't functioning and are failing them.
Well, I'll give you some of my remarks and you can look at that. Because I think that there's a balance there to encourage and foster meaningful dialogue. And that's really plainly put. And I think you're right. There are often times when an assumption is made that can cause someone with a different viewpoint or a different world to feel marginalized because of that. And I think that's the point of what folks are trying to do, to give that opportunity for authentic dialogue with one another in a way to affect positive change. And conservatism doesn't mean, it shouldn't mean racism. It's a different ideology. Things transfer into things. As you know, the world is not one way and another way. There's a zillion gradations in between. So I think that I hear what you're saying, and I think you're validating your point, validating who you are as opposed to. So all of these things require much more than a glib statement, and I think passions run hot. So it's important to look at that and be able to authentically dialogue That's the real truth.
I don't think it's a close statement. I think it's, it's an important fabric of society that's being destroyed. There's not an ability to disagree. That's really what America needs, is an ability to disagree. It's okay to disagree. But, having a mandate around safe spaces, that's not going to get you there. So, I encourage, if you really want to have diversity with a big D, inclusion with a big I, that means knowing all people, all socioeconomic statuses, all people of all sexual orientation, all people of all gender, all capable of being racist, sexist, all capable, doesn't matter, all levels. There's no exception to the rule. So all people need to be held on an equal level. And I think then we can actually have some equal conversations.
Can I just jump in? I don't think anybody has disagreed with anything you said.
I didn't say anybody is.
Okay, but I mean, I feel like you've sort of taken this approach that, this is to the exclusion of all points of view, or that you've made assumptions about the perspectives or ideological stances of the other people here, when I don't know that that's apparent. I also think, this was a public event that everyone in the community was invited to. So to the extent that if it is the case that most people are of a certain position or ideological stance, that's just too pain. I think the conversation, the fact that you've been speaking and everyone's been respectful and listening, like this is an open dialogue. I haven't heard anybody make a suggestion that, people who approach us from a different angle are an ist, or aren't welcome in the conversation. I just want to point that out. And, maybe I am wrong or other people disagree, but I don't think anybody is pointing fingers, suggesting that this conversation is only for people of a certain belief set, anything like that. That's all.
Wonderful.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to ask a question. You said that a DEI audit, the idea of a DEI audit scares you. And you said something about scrubbing the collection clean or scrubbing things clean. Can you kind of go into some detail on that? Why do you feel that it's a DEI audit would scrub something clean?
So there's a DEI kind of department. Actually, there's plenty of DEI departments that are forming around the country. And what they do is they scrub for language. The Northwestern DEI department is scrubbing professors' releases as it relates to research. And essentially what it's doing is changing the communication that they have about the research. Sometimes it's stopping the dissemination of research that goes counter to the DEI narrative. I think we all intuitively know what that would be. It might be that there would be a book
I don't know
on a certain topic that might not be allowed in the library. I don't know.
Because I need to understand what inclusivity means.
I'm sorry,
For
can you hear?
you. I need to understand what inclusivity means for you on the DEI struggle. Because I struggle to put those two things together.
I'm not following the question. I apologize.
What do you mean when you say inclusivity, do we understand what a DEI struggle is?
A DEI, I think that's a great question, right? What is a DEI?
Well, I see what it means to you.
I think that's what you meant by that.
Well, I was going by the comment that you made earlier about having a DEI audit at the library.
Right, and tell me if I'm way off base here, but when you'll have to forgive me, I didn't detail what a DEI audit would entail for the library, but I don't look at it, nor does my team look at it as a subtraction of things, of information, of language. We look at it as an addition of things that have been not readily available or not something that was intuitively thought of as library collections or as a purpose within the library. These are things that we just tradition just never thought of. And what we're realizing now is that we've been completely off about the whole thing. That if we are standing here as an institution saying, our mission statement saying, the pillars of librarianship in the United States that say everyone is welcome in the public library. Well, in order for us to do that, to build a welcoming environment, we have to make sure that we are representing everyone. And I think that's where we, not just us, but other libraries as well, other organizations as well, have missed the boat now. So to me, it's not a subtraction of things, it's an addition of things.
That's great. And one more comment. I don't want to hog the comments, but for me, it's very important. It really is. I have a Mexican Swedish background. Last week, I was encouraged by some advocates to come to the Evanston Township open house. Something I just had no interest in. I'm not a parent there. They said, you just have to come see what's happening. It's the open house where you normally meet the teachers, learn about curriculum. And they had affinity night. And as you walked in, they had a room for Black people, Latinx people. I know it's Latino, I won't say the word. Asian, Middle Eastern. There was no room for Caucasians. That room was anti-racist. I walked in to see what was happening. They said, you're in that room. I said, I'm half Latino, half Swedish. Do I have to go to that room? Yeah. Well, think about the impact you'd have as a white person being in that Latino room. Those affinity groups, I'm sure they have value. I think people of common backgrounds can find value with each other, and they can find support and sympathy, because there is racism in this world. There are wrongs that are happening. But for the government to separate people by the color of their skin has gone too far. So when I hear about a library having a DEI audit, I worry that we go down the path of the too far. There are things that are wrong in the world, and they're wrong for people of various backgrounds, but you can go too far. And so I feel like it's my mission to be the outlier in the conversation, to bring the issues up, absolutely care about people. I don't want racism in the world, but I think that there are things that are going too far.
That could be said on either side, probably.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you.
I just actually wanted to, this is with the conversation going on about the audit. Amy, you have, I think it's very gutsy and brave of you to create this, what the current picture looks like in your organization. And I'm sure a lot of people here with other organizations have seen that. And this really identifies, I think, what your DEI audit would look like. Maybe it's a subset of it, right? Am I right?
No,
Doing that? So one of the things I wanted to just point out here is there is inequity in many ways, right? So there's a gender imbalance, there is a race imbalance, there is a great pay imbalance, right? So those are, I think, really key. And you said it's nice to feel comfortable if you have someone who's there who kind of represents some sort of background of yours. And it doesn't only have to be race or color of your skin. It could be just, a language you speak, or, you could be from the Lgbtq community. So there's that, element of equity that I think is really clearly mentioned here that is lacking. So when someone had asked a question earlier about how, one of the things that what would you do in your organization, I would think that this was a result of what you wanted to, right? I mean, this is something you would want to address.
Yeah, and as I shared, doing that, it was just something that evolved as I was preparing for tonight. But it's one of those things when you start kind of unfurling, can't stop, and you just want to keep it. As horrible as the information may be at the end, or disappointing it may be at the end, you just can't stop unfurling it. When I came to Glencoe, I told the board that this is not like a stepping stone job. I've always wanted to work in Glencoe. I've always wanted to be at that library. So for me, to be responsible for the library, the position I have, it's to look at things like that and to become very aware of those things and to give good, strong efforts into improving things.
So I'm going to ask you maybe a little bit more on the spot. Do you have any challenges in meeting some of this to make it equitable?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna kind of do some mental vomiting here. I mean, there are a lot of challenges to that. I mean, could that be turned around in one fiscal year? Unlikely. It would have to be a plan that would, entail multiple fiscal years. I think most people here know that your public library is funded by property tax revenue. And we are a very well-funded library, but because we have an operating budget that's really kind of tight already, we would have to start looking at how we could reallocate things to make that more equitable. It also has to look at something I think we were talking about earlier is, being deliberate and being honest in forging a plan for this sort of thing. It's very simple at the front end of it to say, wow, this is really terrible. I need to do something. And to want to act quickly, right? Like I said, I jumped into concrete pools at first, but it's really important that we look at it, we peel back all the layers, get as much information about it as we can so we can respond to it with a plan that is sustainable. Because it's not a quick fix, it's not a switch that we turn on and say, yeah, we're good now. It's going to take time.
We have one last question, but before I read it, with more of a comment. Reverend Gary and I were on the subcommittee along with Amy and myself to organize this evening. One thing we said in part when we first met, we talked about a lot of different things and how an in-person event can go. I want to first of all say thank you for raising your voice and stating your thoughts and sharing them here, because one thing that we talked about was that's important in having the discussion. That's why we wanted to do this. That's why we didn't want an echo chamber. And it's important to have all voices included. We're talking about inclusivity. That's important. So I thank you for.
And would love to be involved trying to bring more people with differing viewpoints.
I love to hear that, because I don't want to be a part of, I've only been here 3 months in this community. I don't want to be a part of an echo chamber. So I just want to say thank you. And again, thank all of you. I don't know, again, Peter has submitted this, so I don't know if this is a comment, Peter, if you're still listening online or if you're here. But Peter says, I wonder what we can do to actively promote encounters between races, religious backgrounds, and sexual orientations. So, who wants to take that one? In this community.
Well, in this community, I think that you're starting to see this now. And I think that when we do, like, perhaps the ecumenical Thanksgiving services, or it's opportunities for the community to come together and see each other, and talk with one another and share with each other. And I think that's important. And perhaps that fosters that. But there's an intentionality to this that requires thinking and planning and thought behind it. And it can be done. But it isn't something that you just say, well, we're all together in this group, so this will all magically make it happen. It's one-on-one dialogue and relationships with people. And being willing, as I've said before, to be vulnerable, to be authentic with one another. And to be willing to start to enter into a discussion and find people who are willing to dialogue with in a respectful and authentic way. When power balances get off kilter, that we have problems. And I think that if we all enter, that's the purpose of this kind of dialogue. It's to allow varying voices to be able to speak, all of them who have concerns. Be able to bring that to the table. Because if you can sit down and honor what another person is thinking, and try and enter into an empathetic situation, you will change. All of us do. I see Will shaking his head up and down. But I think that automatic, that has changed my life. I would never thank the people who have taken me on the journey of encountering people different from me and listening and walking with them. I can't be them, I can't feel everything that they felt, but I certainly know that by allowing myself to be vulnerable, I have grown and changed. And it's made me a better parent and a better minister. If I cling stubbornly to one idea in my mind and don't allow, we've got a congregation of various ideas and viewpoints. If I represent only one faction of that, I'm not doing my job. Our founder in Methodism is John Wesley, and he said, do no harm. That's the mantra first and foremost. Don't hurt someone else. And then you go from there.
Come on, help me again thank our panelists. I'm going to give you a skills and round of applause for being in person and virtual as well. Come on, give you a simple applause. We do want to call again to thank Writers Theater for allowing us this opportunity to have such rich dialogue. Dialogue does not stop after we leave. The dialogue continues. We would like to keep the dialogue going to help build the strategies of how we all can move forward together. I want to just thank some of our village officials who have been here from the beginning to the end. Our public safety director, Carrie, who is here. One of our village presidents, Gary Rubin, is here. I want to thank them for being here. I want all of the Glencoe Council of Inclusion and Community to come forward. Y'all can come quick. Y'all can come quick. Come quick. And the reason I'm asking all of them to come is because they can't see y'all around here. Come over to you. Ruben is our trustee. He's our trustee. Trustee. This is the Glencoe Council of Inclusion and Community. We are here to see and hear your voice so that we all together can strategize how we can become a beloved community. Our next meeting is October the 6th, and you can chime in by going to the village website. Got it right here while I just read it, right? villageofglencoe.org to tune in into our meetings. We want your public comments. We want to hear your voice. We want to hear your concerns, that we might share, continue programming like this, and work with our leadership of our village so that we can become beloved.
Amen.
Do I have anything else to say?
We're down one member, so we're looking for people who want to help us. So if that's something you're interested in, please join us.
Yep, the application.
You want to join us?
Sure, I'd love to.
All right.
Excellent. I'm going to ask you to see our chairperson, Ms. Clark, to get all that information on how to apply and go from there. Once again, thank you all for coming. Richard, thank you. I'm sorry. And what we do is we appreciate you.